This is section 3.5 about the flow of energy. So all energy in an ecosystem begins with the sun, and producers are going to be the first level of the food chain, made out of autotrophs, which means that they can make up their own food, and they do this through a process called photosynthesis. Producers are plants, so grasses, trees, flowers, and things like that. Consumers are anything that has to eat in order to survive. So anything that cannot make its own sugars, but it has to eat to get it. So you can have an antelope that's eating the plants, or you can have the lion that's eating the antelope. Both are considered consumers. There's a couple different kinds of consumers. An herbivore is going to be one that only eats plants. They have a specific digestive system designed to eat only plants. Like cows have four-chambered stomachs, or they have just molars to grind the food and things like that. Carnivores can only eat meat, so they have incisors to rip apart meat, and they have a special digestive system for that. And omnivores can eat either. And so, like, we are an omnivore, and so we have both incisors and molars, and we have special bacteria that help us digest plant material and meat. Decomposers are going to bring nutrients back into the soil, so things like mushrooms and fungi are going to recycle nutrients, so they decompose. Detrivores are a special kind of decomposers because they eat the nutrients for themselves, so they will eat like roadkill and stuff like that, so they help break down dead and dying things, but they are still obtaining the nutrients for themselves and not just returning it to the soil. Okay, food chains. If you start at the bottom of the food chain, that's called a primary producer. Okay, so that's where all the energy is kind of starting in your plants. And then as you move up, the next level is called the primary consumer, and these are typically herbivores. And then you go up to secondary consumers, which are typically omnivores or carnivores. Tertiary, which is definitely a carnivore, and sometimes a quaternary, which is your top predators. Some food chains will only go to a secondary consumer. So we have in South Dakota, we have grasses, prairie dogs, and then coyotes, and that's the end of the chain. But in this marine food chain here, you can see there's lots of different levels, and it goes all the way up to these top predators. Food webs are much more complex. Obviously, specific animals don't just eat one food source all the time, so everyone has different food sources. And you have to remember that when you're drawing the arrows, the arrow is replacing the words eaten by. So this large fish is eaten by the bald eagle. That's the way the energy is flowing. When we look at the amount of energy in each level, this is called the trophic level, and troph means to eat. So basically you're looking at the levels that you're eating at. So let's say we start with about 1,000,000 joules of sunlight. The primary producers are going to obtain about 10,000 of those joules. The rest of them are going to be lost as heat. The sun radiates, the heat and stuff also. So the plants are going to get 10,000 joules. When the herbivore eats that plant, it's only going to get 10% of that energy because the plant had to use the other 90% to function, to grow, to build more cells and tissues. And every time you go up that next level, you're going to lose another 10% of energy. So if you look at the tertiary consumers, they have to eat a lot more food to get the same amount of energy as something at the bottom of the food chain. Next section is 3.6, the biogeochemical cycles. Okay, so bio means life and geo means earth. So it's basically the cycling of chemicals around our ecosystems through living things and through the abiotic factors. So we're going to look at water, carbon, and nitrogen cycles. The water cycle, you have learned about many times in your school career. So these will all be review terms. Maybe one of the new ones is transpiration. I don't think we talk about that much in middle school, but okay. So evaporation is basically when water turns from a liquid to a vapor. It happens on a sunny day on a lake. The water is turning up into vapor. When that vapor reaches the upper layers of the atmosphere where it's really cold, that turns back into a liquid, and that's called condensation, and that begins to form our clouds. When that water gets heavy enough, it's going to fall to earth, and that's called precipitation. And it comes in many different forms depending on the temperature at the time. And then we also have transpiration, which is the process of water moving and evaporating out of the leaves. So as water gets sucked up the plant on a hot day, it'll evaporate off of the leaves, and that is going to go up into the clouds as well. Just a reminder, the process that pulls this water up through the tree is called capillary action. As the water falls to earth, it's going to start penetrating the layers of soil. So the first level is called a water table, and that's what you would have like when it downpours really fast, the water table gets filled up, and your grass gets squishy and stuff. But then it'll start seeping down into your groundwater, and it'll kind of get stored there, which is what the plants are going to use. And then it's going to seep down into an aquifer, which is large areas of porous rock that hold water. And we can drill down into these aquifers to get our drinking water. And that's what wells are, and that's where we get a lot of our city water, is from the aquifer. All of these layers can dry out during drought, which causes big problems. Obviously, we're running out of water. And then if all of these levels are full and it rains again, then that water is going to run off into a lake or stream, and then you're going to have flooding of lakes. And that runoff also adds to pollution, because whatever's in the soil, like on a farm, pesticides and things like that, is also going to go into the water. So here you can see a water molecule condensing, precipitating, running off into the lake. It's seeping down into the ground. Plants are going to take that up and transpire it out, or it's going to just evaporate right out of the lake. Carbon cycle is a little bit more complex. Carbon comes in many different forms. Your carbon dioxide gas, which is found up in the atmosphere. Carbonates, which is kind of a substance that makes up limestone and things. Organic compounds, which we've already talked about, are lipids, carbs, nucleic acids, and proteins. And our fossil fuels, which are made of compressed organic material. So organisms that lived a long time ago, millions of years ago, when they died under the right circumstances, their bodies were compressed, and that is what our oil is made out of. Okay, so the first process that actually removes carbon dioxide from the air is called photosynthesis. And plants can do that to remove the CO2 from the air. We breathe out CO2 when we eat sugar, and that's called cell respiration. And so when you eat your lunch or whatnot, whatever carbon you have in your food that you're eating is then going to get released as a gas. Combustion is when we burn those fossil fuels, so like those dead dinosaurs that died millions of years ago, when we turn them in and put them in an engine, they're going to burn off and go into the atmosphere. When animals die, their organic compounds return to the soil. That's called decomposition. And like I said, under the right circumstances, like falling into a tar pit or under volcanic ash, those organic compounds can actually turn into fossil fuels. And when water rushes over limestone, the limestone actually breaks down, and the carbonates go into the water, and it allows animals to make shells from that. So clams, oysters, lobsters, and things can build up those carbonates and make their shell stronger. So here, if we follow a CO2 molecule, it's going into the tree, and the sheep is eating the tree, respires that CO2 back out, or it dies, becomes a fossil fuel. Put that into our factory. Combustion then gets that out back into the air, and it goes around and around. Okay, the last step is the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is super important for plants. Problem is that it's most abundant gas in the air, but plants can't actually use it in the air. They can't take it in like CO2. So there has to be a process to get the nitrogen from the air into the soil so plants can use it. So the first step that happens is the nitrogen gas is converted into, it has to convert into ammonium. So the first way that can happen is decomposers can actually just take dead things and turn that into ammonium. Or the second way is that bacteria that live in the roots of legumes, like our soybeans, can convert that gas into ammonia, which is called nitrogen fixation. Other bacteria then are going to convert that ammonia into the ions, and that is called ammonification. So first two steps, nitrogen fixation and ammonification. Now we have ammonium. We just need to turn that into nitrate so that a plant can use it, and that's called nitrification. Kind of makes sense. Making nitrate, called nitrification in the word. And then the plants can actually take that nitrate up and use it to grow, and that's called assimilation. So plants need that nitrogen in order to grow. And you would notice if a plant doesn't have nitrogen because it would not have green leaves. It would turn yellow. So that's a very important process, obviously, for plants. So the main thing is either you can have decomposition that is helping with that, or bacteria are going to convert those ammonium into nitrate so that the plant can take it back up.